Unlike other recent Transformers games, Transformers War for Cybertron has no relation to the movie franchise. This distinction gives the game more freedom with the Transformers mythos, allowing for a more interesting story and setting, but sadly the developers didn't seem to know what to do with that freedom. The game takes place during the civil war between the Autobots and the Decepticons on their home planet of Cybertron. The story is divided between two campaigns, one of which follows Megatron's quest to infect the core of Cybertron with an evil and powerful energy source known as Dark Energon. The other campaign follows Optimus and his fellow Autobots in their mission to undo the damage done by Megatron. Sadly, the actual story isn't very compelling or original. The predictable twists, lame plot, and uninspired cutscenes will leave you bored and unfulfilled. The game does do something interesting with the story. While most games would either have the two stories running parallel to one another, or have the bad guy campaign be an alternate what-if scenario, in this game the stories are sequential. The Autobot missions start right after the Decepticon missions end, so while you do have the option to start with either campaign, you're expected to play the Decepticon missions first.
I see you have finally succeeded in the simple task I gave you. Perhaps you're not as worthless as I thought. Report back to base at once!
At first, the gameplay seems to fare much better. The combat is well polished, if a bit formulaic, and the ability to instantly transform into your character's vehicle form adds an extra dimension to the gameplay. The appeal doesn't last, however. After the first few missions of traveling through nearly identical environments and fighting the same enemies over and over again, I found myself losing interest rapidly. The main culprit is the setting itself. Cybertron is essentially a giant robot planet, so no matter where on the planet you are, you're still in a mechanized city. That doesn't necessarily mean the developers are off the hook entirely. Even a simple palette swap for some of the different areas would have made a huge difference. Instead, almost every hallway, door, wall, roadway, and pillar is made out of the same gray metallic substance. It gets very boring very fast. Compounding this is the fact that the level design is incredibly linear, with the vast majority of the game taking place in narrow halls and small rooms. This makes for boring gameplay under normal circumstances, but is even worse in this game because it makes your vehicle transformation almost useless for anything other than boosting your movement speed during the lulls in combat. There are a few set pieces where you will actually need to use your vehicle form, such as a segment that would give the Master Chief a major case of deja vu. Beyond that, in two levels where you play as flying characters, you'll spend the vast majority of the time fighting in hallways in your humanoid form. The enemy types are equally repetitive, nothing outside of the typical shooter fare, snipers, infantry, flyers, etc., with each having only one character model for each faction, and even then the difference is barely more than a different color neon highlights. The boss characters are significantly more interesting. Throughout the game you'll find yourself up against classic Transformers characters such as Trypticon and Omega Supreme. However, even though the characters are interesting, the actual fights are not. They never really amount to more than avoiding a rigid pattern of attacks until the enemy reveals its weak point and doing as much damage as you can until the cycle repeats itself. That's literally it.
Too much heat buildup. Aim for those dissipating. Not as tough as he lets on.
That looked really painful!
I'll crush you. I'll crush you all. Keep it up, Autobots. We're hurting him.
In an effort to make things more interesting, the developers threw in a co-op mode that allows you to play with up to 2 friends, but it does little to add any fun to the experience. The enemy AI isn't smart enough to warrant any type of coordinated teamwork, and the level design is so linear you can't do much more than just shoot the enemies directly in front of you anyway. Basically, the co-op in this game is only going to be as fun as the people you are playing with, and the game doesn't really deserve credit for that. A little more value is added by the multiplayer mode. Game types are nothing special, deathmatch, team deathmatch, and versions of capture the flag, territories, and assault. But the addition of kill streaks, custom classes, and of course the ability to transform add a fair amount of diversity to the gameplay. The multiplayer level design has the same problem that the single player campaign has of having very little aesthetic diversity. but the layouts are well balanced and do a good job of accommodating both the traditional third-person combat and the agile vehicles. The weapons and classes seem fairly balanced, although I do admit the minigun seemed a bit overpowered when I was using it, and the gameplay is genuinely fun, but I don't think it has enough variety or originality to hold your interest for long. The main problem with the multiplayer is its small community. Finding a match in anything but the most popular game types can be tough. Another problem is that when you search for a match, the game doesn't filter out DLC maps that you don't have. So you could be searching and find a match, only to be kicked all the way back to the title screen because you didn't have that map. To top the game off is a mode similar to Gears of War's Horde mode, called Escalation. As with Horde mode, you fight cooperatively with friends or random people online against waves of enemies. This mode isn't just a simple Gears ripoff though. The game has a point system where you earn points as you kill enemies and spend those points to unlock weapons, power-ups, and open up new areas in the map. It's an interesting concept and almost makes up for the fact that there's only 2 maps for it. One where you play as the Autobots and one where you play as the Decepticons. It's a fun mode and will keep you entertained for a little while, but the limited map selection and enemy types hinder its replay value.
The battle is far from over, Decepticon! Prepare for destruction!
Now, I've never been a huge Transformers fan, but I have always liked it. And I was somewhat excited when I heard that they're putting together a Transformers game that wasn't based on these recent movies, especially one taking place on Cybertron. It certainly had the potential to be a really good game, but the lame, unimaginative design causes it all to fall short of its potential. In the end, I would say this game is worth a rent, but I don't think this game has enough substance to merit purchasing it at full price unless perhaps you're a die-hard Transformers fan and feel the need to add this to your collection.
Autobots, roll out!